What are the biggest changes you've seen in how shippers and brokers approach RFPs over the past few years?
Wow, good question. Um, yeah, shippers. Well, I think there's two angles. Obviously, like you said, shippers and brokers. And from a shipper aspect, shippers they look at contract terms. And over the past few years, and everybody's different, right? But just a general trend is length of contract. Um, with rates being lower overall, especially in certain markets and modalities, shippers are trying to either extend contract terms or in an RFP, they may not hold an RFP. They may say, "Hey, can you hold your rates from previous years?" So that's on the shipper side. On the broker side, um, I think one of the big changes is brokers are truly not, they've had the data, right? They're just leveraging it in a different manner. And what I mean by that is they're really understanding costs, at least I don't want to say the smarter, not smart brokers, but the smarter brokers, they're using the data, they're leveraging it and understanding what they're bidding on. And is it actually going to make them money, right? All while being able to service the shipper or the vendor at the same time. But the old saying is all $100 is not created equal, and there could be operational challenges for a broker that a shipper presents. There could be something that's maybe outside of kind of what you bid on. So they're really leveraging data through different vendors, partners, platforms to understand hey, should we bid on this lane? Do we have a carrier base? Can we build a carrier base? Is it within our wheelhouse or our niche? So on the broker side, really looking and going deep into the data that is available. I see that happening often, and it's something we do as well. So
Got it. Got it. And in your current role or previous roles, what's the most common frustration brokers face when responding to RFPs, and how did you handle it, or how do you handle it now?
so frustration is I always think of who, what, when, where, why, and how, right? An RFP, in my opinion, is asking for rate, right? It's asking for what? Well, what is your rate? But a lot of times there's not a platform or a vehicle to explain why your rate is, right? Whether it's low, whether it's high. And don't get me wrong, shippers or vendors, they don't have time to sort through a lot of um, subjective data. But I think if vendors spent a little time on understanding why the price is the way it is, they would come out ahead, right? So one of my big frustrations is a platform or some way to be able to put notes that are actually looked at and maybe quantified. Again, I don't know how you do that, but being able to not just provide a rate, but also to be able to provide feedback on that rate. Hey, we have capacity in this lane. Hey, we've ran this lane or very similar X amount of times. Hey, there's, you need drop trailers or you need late appointments that cause, more money or the price to be increased. Whereas maybe a new provider or a new a vendor, broker, what have you, will look at it and say, oh, okay, assume the best case scenario, and at time of tender, it gets rejected, right? It gets rejected because they didn't understand the full scope of what they were actually bidding on. So, I think that kind of leads on to the second point, which is misguided information, right? Um, I've seen RFPs where you get 3-digit zip and 3-digit zip, and what's your rate per mile? Pretty much, that's it. And I've seen RFPs that have every single piece of information that's almost data overload, but I'd rather have a data overload and pick the information that I feel is necessary to bid properly versus nothing at all. So misguided information or lacking information is a big, big challenge. when it comes to submitting an RFP and giving pointed pricing versus, hey, here's a little bit of information. Please give me your best price.
Gotcha. And with that misguided information or lack of, do you go back to the customer? What do you try to reach out to them? How do you handle that?
Yeah, I think it's always best case scenario to try to go back to them. But I can't say oftentimes, but there's plenty of times I've seen where the customer says, "Thank you, we'll note that and take it into consideration." Whether they do or they don't is another story, but always go back to the customer. Try to give as much information as possible, whether they ask for it or not. What is your strategy? Why didn't you bid online? Right? Everybody always talks about, well, why is your rate the way it is? And even if there is a vehicle or a platform to say this is the carrier base I use, how many times I ran it, why my rate is this way it is. I think it's also important to be able to explain why you didn't bid on a certain lane or lanes. Because I've seen a lot of, I won't say a lot, but more frequently, I've seen RFPs, especially when there's secondary and tertiary rounds. They say,
Hmm.
"Hey, to make your submission more plausible or feasible, we want you to bid on more lanes."
Hmm.
Which I understand certain shippers they don't want to, that they may have a certain threshold of spend on with a certain provider, and if it doesn't meet that, they may say something of that nature.
Hmm.
But diversely, I don't want to bid on something that can't be serviced or is not going to meet expectation. So having a vehicle or platform to say, I didn't bid on this lane, here is why, is also just as important as saying why you did bid on something.
Hmm. Hmm. Gotcha. Gotcha. What separates like a successful RFP response from one that just gets ignored in your mind?
Well, first and foremost, it goes back to kind of what I just said is don't bid on everything. Now that's kind of a broad theme, but bidding on everything is generally going to get your bid kicked out, right? That says, hey, we do every modality and we do it in all states and we can do it perfectly, and not likely, right? So first and foremost, don't bid on everything. Strategy is one thing, but to be able to execute on your strategy and what you've bid and be able to present that in a quick um, easily digested, response. I think that's important to say, this is what we do. This is what we've done, maybe not for that particular customer, that RFP, but in previous, and this is how we execute on it, right? Execution is paramount. It's the old price versus cost analysis. You may pay $1,000, or a shipper might see $1,000 on an RFP, whereas maybe your submission is $1,200. Well,
Hmm.
dollar for dollar, the $1,200 submission is more, right? But if you have that lane one time every day throughout the year, 365 times, and the carrier broker for that matter rejects the tender, let's just say, I don't know, 100 times, right? Well,
Hmm.
what is your cost after that to then cover?
Hmm.
Is it 1,400? Okay, well, that 1,200 doesn't seem so bad, right? Because they couldn't execute on it, or they don't have capacity, or whatever the issue may be, right?
Yeah.
Um, so when it comes to winning RFPs, I think everybody is so enamored by winning versus explaining, here's what I'm good at, here's where I fit, here's what I can do, and here's how I can service you, right? That strategy part's great, but here's how I can execute on what I bid, and here's the data that supports that.
Excellent.
That to me is winning, because
Hmm.
last time I checked, winning is not just a singular thing. It can be, I guess, but in the context of what we're speaking about, winning is when both parties win. I have a service I'm providing, you have a service I need. We both can do what we've said we're going to do, and the price is matching what you want, right? Price and overall cost, I should say. So I think redefining and rescoping what win is and kind of how you look at an RFP, that really matters. And then furthermore, how do you execute on it?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point. And it kind of leads into my next question, which was around data. You mentioned it briefly, but like how and maybe another question too, but like how important is data, like historical data, carrier capacity, ELD information, when you're kind of decide on what lanes to bid on or which ones maybe not to bid on?
Yeah, that's there's a lot of different, I think, ways we can go with that, but um, I'll take it from the broker side and then I'll take it from the shipper side, right? So for a broker, like I mentioned before, I don't think there's ever too much data. Um, I'd rather ha- I'd rather have too much and be able to pull out what is needed than not have enough, and then basically have issues at come time of tender or award. It causes a ton of problems that just cost more time and money, right? So, on the broker side, or excuse me, on the shipper side, um, broad data sets, right? And what I mean by that is, hey, I have this 3-digit zip code or 3-digit zip code range, and I need you to give me a price to California. And here is the average miles. It's doable, right? And for some shippers or vendors, that's the best way to go about it based on how they operate, right? They may have broke it down into Southern Cal, Central Cal, and then Northern Cal, right? And that's fine. And you do have to make some assumptions and bake that in there. And that's just how they operate, right? They may not know that, hey, this is a particular customer that we're delivering product to. They may say, okay, Northern Cal, we know we have whatever 120 different customers that we're going to deliver to. So we need a price to go there because their POs may not be as steady as maybe a CPG or food shipper, right?
Yeah.
Which makes all the sense in the world, but give some of that context, right? And it doesn't have to be paragraphs because, believe it or not, brokers don't read and people don't read stuff, right? They just look at it and say, okay, it's my best bet. So if you have a broad data set, like, such as a 3-digit zip code or a range, there's nothing wrong with that. But be able to provide some context of, give me volume. How often does it ship? Do you have previous lane data that you can share, right? Be able to give some context to the data that you're wanting your providers to quote, right?
Yeah.
So that's one thing on the shipper side. Another thing is, as a new participant in an RFP, oftentimes what can happen is you're just there as a vehicle or leverage to get incumbent pricing down, right? And what that does, in my opinion, is it can push new incumbents away. And don't get me wrong, the market it's it can be tight for especially for brokers trying to get their foot in the door. And generally, what happens is brokers will use the one thing they can, um, and that's pricing. And they'll give lower pricing to get their foot in the door. And that's the wrong way to do it, and it sets both parties up for failures. So with new incumbents, don't just use them. And this is not every shipper, don't get me wrong, but for new incumbents, don't just use them as leverage for not new incumbents, new providers or brokers. Don't just use them as leverage for incumbents to get their pricing down, because you're not giving them a chance to basically show their worth and provide service. And I get it, you can't let every new broker or carrier, for that matter, into your network. But if you do choose to let them be a part of the RFP, make sure that they're at least getting feedback if they didn't win something, right? Just because you're new doesn't mean you win. That's not the case. But don't use newcomers or new vendors, brokers, what have you, as leverage for your incumbents. It's not fair. It's a waste of time. If you don't want them in there, don't invite them. It's just that simple,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, Another thing that comes to mind, speaking of feedback, is percentage-based feedback, right? Oftentimes it's, hey, you're 10% or lower, you're in the 10 to 25, or you're 25% or higher. Okay, well, percentage of what, right? A, tell me what that is a percentage of. Is that the lowest bid? Or is that your target rate? And furthermore, if it is, are you going to select that carrier? Is this purely based on price? Has incumbency taken in effect? Do you guys, is it a regional model and you're looking at where carriers or brokers are domiciled? What is it, right? Because
Hmm.
basically all that does is push price down, and then the ancillary effects usually come after, maybe not right away, but brokers or carriers for that matter are only going to sustain losses for so long, right? And if you're
Right.
losing and losing and losing or keep rejecting tenders, that does no one any good, right? So percentage based feedback, in my opinion, is, lack of better words, garbage.
Hmm.
It gives a good idea, but it's not pointed enough to get to the end goal of here's the best provider with the best rate that can provide and execute on what they bid. It does, in my opinion, does not do that.
Right.
And then I guess kind of tertiary to what I was mentioning is awards based on performance versus price, right? So that would mean you're an incumbent.
Yeah.
And yes, I do think incumbents should take preference,
Yeah.
but don't invite every Tom, Dick, and Sally to your RFP. If you're an incumbent, okay, you got invited because you're within our cost parameters and you've performed on it, right? Why get rid of them? And furthermore, if you have a group of those folks and you got tons of people knocking on your door, just tell them no, right? Now that might be counterintuitive of saying, oh, okay, well, incumbents versus newcomers, if you have a group of folks that is executing at what you have awarded at the price and the rate that you've awarded, I don't see a reason why you invite new folks. If you're
Mm.
inviting new folks and new vendors to come on board just so you can push your incumbents down, you're doing it wrong and you're going to set yourself up for failure. Might not feel like that way over the last 2 or 3 years because the prices are so low, they can use
Mhm.
that leverage. That will turn, and your contracted freight will then hit the spot market, and that
Mhm.
will drive your rates up. So, pricing based, awards based on execution and performance versus pure pricing. And the last thing is, for the love of God, 2 rounds or less, please.
Mm.
You get 2 weeks, you usually get a month on the shipper side, right? It takes time. I'll speak
Yeah.
for myself and probably a good amount of other, solid brokers. It takes time to do this. It takes capital, right? We want
Yeah.
your business, but we also want to be able to perform on your business. Give us, 2 rounds or less and give us time to do the RFP. I'm not saying we need a month, right? Business doesn't stop. But at the same time, there needs to be time to be able to analyze the data, understand what it is we're bidding, and provide the best possible price on your lanes. And then, okay, round two, cut in half, cut it down to 75%. Here's where you stand. We want to give you the freight. You're up against X amount of folks. Give us your best price. And then there you go.
Yeah.
That's my
Yep.
that's my thoughts on things that could change in the RFP process.
Got it. Got it. I wanted to go pull through a little bit on a couple points you made because they were like just made me think from a broker standpoint, how do you even handle it is when you do get the 3-digit zip or you get the state to state type of lane or bid, you don't have to give me the details on how you do it, but how do you do it? Like, or not how do you do it, but doesn't that inherently put the shipper or the responses they're going to get and the brokers at a disadvantage because they can potentially, different brokers are going to bid it differently. So from a shipper standpoint, you're like, okay, you might see a pretty significant variance in the responses you're getting.
Yeah, and so it's that question, and I think it kind of touches on a lot of things I touched. Is well, two aspects, right? From a broker standpoint, is what information do I have at hand, right? What information did they provide? Is it just 3-digit zip to 3-digit zip range or 3-digit zip range to state? And what is the data that I have available, right? Have I worked with this customer before? Can I go look at my lane history and defer? Oh, okay, well, actually ships here, or mostly ships here, but sometimes it ships here, right? Um, what I like to do, doesn't mean that it's right or wrong, is look at the major cities within that state it's delivering to, and then you can run some miles and figure out, hey, this is pretty close to where I need to be, but also put minimums. I think minimums on all in line haul or line haul is a good way to look at that, right? Because if you're like,
Mm,
oh, 3-digit zip 900 to SoCal. Well, 900 is SoCal. Where's it going, right? That could be 2 miles, that could be 200 miles, right? Give
yeah.
or take. So, in that sense, a rate per mile may not work. So you need a minimum to protect yourself in there, right? Um, and then on the shipper side, um, actually, what was the
No, no,
question?
I think,
Yeah.
no, I think you covered it. You covered it
Okay.
there. Yeah. It just always baffles me on how brokers handle that because it is without having communication and to your point, getting to more details,
Yeah.
more granular about, where you're actually shipping, how many miles, things like that. You need some of that metadata to really get down to providing an accurate price.
Or I would say, if you don't have that data, either ask for it, and if you still can't get it, don't bid it, right?
Yeah.
Why would you? It's like bidding on, going to a car auction, right? Saying, oh, I got this 2000 Lamborghini, da 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 da, whatever, right? And you're like, oh, I know what that's worth. It's great, but you can't see a picture of it, can't see it, can't touch it, can't drive it.
Mm-hmm.
Why am I going to bid on it? I don't know what I'm bidding on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And brothers like, oh, we'll
Mm-hmm.
figure it out. Don't
Yeah.
figure it out. Ask the questions. It's much easier to do it that way.
That's a great analogy. Yeah. Yeah. Um, when it comes to winning RFPs, what matters more, having the lowest rate or having a strong relationship? And this is kind of a, I don't know, philosophical one, but
You know, it depends really. I think they're both equally important. Um, man, that's a good one. I mean, relationships matter at the end of the day, right? Um, but when I guess when I think of relationships, right, it's got to be a good relationship, right? In a good relationship, you should be able to communicate. You should be able to ask the questions, whether they're easy questions or hard questions, right? And you should be able to get feedback, right? And I think that relationship, I don't want to say can drive the rate, but it can help you understand why the rate is the way it is. For both parties. Why is this rate this way? Oh, well, you didn't put in there that it's 48-hour drop trailer at the shipper, right? Oh, okay. Well, I thought it was live. So
mm,
I think the relationship does matter. Um, but there's also diversity. You can have a great relationship with a shipper, and at the end of the day, they got budgets to hit. They got price, that they're looking for. They got targets, um, and so I think both are important. But what's really notable and kind of my takeaway is both are equally important as long as you can execute on what you've committed to from a price standpoint, and a subjective or conversation standpoint. Hey, yes, give me volume on that lane. Yes, I can handle 600 moves on one singular lane. For you, no problem. Okay, well, can you do it at X rate? Well, you know what? I can't do it at your target rate, but I can handle it at this rate, right?
yeah.
And again, that means you have a relationship. You can have that conversation. That's a little harder to do with, some of the platforms where it says submit your rate and there's no way for feedback. That's tough to explain, right?
Mhm.
But I think again, I'll go back to that point. If there was a vehicle or a platform that was easy to use to be able to provide that, or at least in the RFP, especially on higher volume lanes, to say, well, I can handle 300 of these 600 at $2 a mile, and if you want anything outside of that,
Mm,
$2.20 a mile or something
yeah.
of that nature, right? Or hey, I'm good with the 300. Yes, I would like the 600, but if you have two brokers and they both said they're at $2, or carriers for that matter, $2 a mile, and they want 300, okay, great, right? Or could drive the conversation, hey, it's between you and another broker. We want to single source this. Can you handle it all at, I don't know, 210 or $1.95 or whatever, their strategy is, to be able
Yeah.
to have that relationship. I think it's just that intermediary to talk about price and talk about some of those finer details, um, to be able to execute on what you're bidding.
Yeah. 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 No, that's yeah, that's a great way to think about it. And I don't know if bro or if shippers are willing to make adjustments, but it seems like it would help them if they did. I mean, just my 2 cents. So last
You know,
question.
I
Go
think
ahead.
it would, but again, my opinion.
Um, if you could change one thing about the RFP process that would make it better for shippers and brokers, what would it be?
Hmm. Um, Man, there's a lot. I think being very pointed with your data, and I think I've seen it both ways. Again, I've seen RFPs that go into such detail, right? That it makes it impossible. I don't say impossible, but it makes it very hard to misbid or say, oh,
Yeah.
well, that's not what I thought, right? So I
Mhm.
think the attention's in the detail of
Mhm.
what you're bidding on. But diversely, there's some shippers that just don't have the time to give in that granular level of detail. But the one thing I would change is, having it so there's minimalistic questions in the RFP process,
Mhm.
and when it comes time to, at tender. You're not surprised, right?
Mhm.
Oh, well, I did bid this, but your expectation was I load 50,000 pounds on this flatbed, right? Or your
Mhm.
expectation was that this is a live load, but you want the trailer there for 48 hours. That's a little different,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So, and the same thing on the broker side. Don't bid it and say, oh, yeah, we can do one thing, and then you're not able to do it, right?
Yeah.
Straight up, don't bid it or ask the questions and see if there's another option, right? So for me, it's the data integrity.
Mhm.
If I'm giving a price on something, that's my stamp of approval. That's my organization's approval that yes, we are bidding this, we can execute on it. So the thing that I would change in the RFP process is give us better data. It's just that simple.
Yeah. 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 Perfect. Perfect. Makes total sense. I was gonna go into a data question too, but we've
What you got?
already. Well, I'm just thinking the data piece of it. Do you think, because there is more data you mentioned earlier on, do you think brokers are using data in the right way? Like if they, or is there still like a gap?
I don't know. I can't speak for other brokers. I'll speak for myself. Is I want to use the data and understand. And I'll give you an example, right? Just recently submitted an RFP, and it was a full truckload RFP and an LTL RFP. We only submitted pricing on the full truckload side. Um, but I did look, they did send 2024 FTL and LTL lane and details, if you will. And I looked at the LTL side, and they had dates and classes and everything, all that data. And one of the things I noticed is, well, instead of shipping some of this LTL, why don't you look at consolidation? Be
Mm,
happy to look at that with you. Happy to talk through that with you. That could save you X amount of time, X amount of dollars, right? Again, I don't know the full ins and outs just based on that data set that was provided, but just the 30,000-foot overview is, hey, there's data there, right? While I didn't bid on it, it doesn't mean you couldn't save, X amount or get this to your customer a day earlier by doing it a different way, right?
yeah.
Again, I'm making assumptions on some of the data, but that's, as a broker, it's our job to not only provide a service and make sure our customers are serviced, but it's to provide solutions, right? Everybody always talks about, oh, I provide this solution. And it's like, I don't want to hear about your 15% savings. That's, everybody can do that. Look at the data a little further. Answer the questions that weren't even asked, right? Why are you doing it this way? In a positive manner. Be a consultant for your customer. So by having that data, it not only helps price more pointed, and give a better submission, but it also can uncover other problems that the customer didn't even know was an option, right?
Mhm.
So for me, the data is key. Are some brokers using it? Maybe, maybe not. From my standpoint, give me all the data. We'll look at it, analyze it, and not only bid accordingly, but potentially give other options. Of
Got it. Got it. Awesome. Awesome. Thanks so much, Josh. I appreciate you giving me some time here.
course.
Best of
Thanks for
luck.
having me, brother.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm gonna stop this recording.